All right, so we're diving into this CoQ10 research paper you sent over.
Okay,
And
sounds good.
honestly, I don't know, what's the deal with this CoQ10? It feels like it's everywhere these days.
It really is, yeah. It's definitely having a moment, but it's not just hype, CoQ10 or coenzyme Q10. It's actually something our bodies make naturally, and it's
Yeah.
super important for our cells to make energy.
Okay, so it's not just like some marketing thing they're putting in our energy drinks.
Right.
We actually produce this ourselves.
We do. It's happening all the time on a microscopic level. Imagine like your cells are these bustling cities,
Yeah.
and the mitochondria, those are the power plants, right?
Right.
CoQ10, it's right there in the middle of it all, playing a key role in something called the electron transport chain.
Okay, I've heard of the electron transport chain,
Hmm.
but I'll be honest, it sounds a little intimidating.
I get it. It's basically how our cells take the food we eat and turn it into energy we can actually use. Think of it kind of like a relay race. You've got the baton passing from runner to runner. CoQ10 is one of those runners shuttling electrons along a pathway, and that creates the energy that powers our whole body.
Wow, so CoQ10 is like this tiny little marathon runner inside our cells. But I have to ask, the research paper also mentioned it's an antioxidant. How does that even work if it's also busy with this whole energy production thing?
It's true, it does both. CoQ10 is wearing a lot of hats in there. It's not just about the energy, it's also protecting our cells from damage, acting as this powerful antioxidant. So you've got these free radicals, these harmful molecules trying to attack our cells. Well, CoQ10 is like a shield, especially for the cell membranes.
Which are?
The cell membranes, they're basically the guardians of the cell, controlling what goes in and out.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, CoQ10 is essential for the cell's overall health and function.
Wow, a real cellular double agent,
Oh,
protecting us from the inside out. It's pretty incredible. But it makes you think, what happens when our CoQ10 levels aren't where they should be?
that's a really important question. And that leads us to CoQ10 deficiency. Now, there are two main types, primary and secondary. Primary CoQ10 deficiency, that's pretty rare. It's often caused by genetic mutations that directly affect how much CoQ10 our bodies can make.
Interesting.
And these mutations, they can lead to a bunch of different health challenges, from like muscle weakness to problems with major organs, like even our kidneys can be affected.
The kidneys?
Yeah, and actually, the research paper you sent over specifically mentioned something called steroid-resistant nephrotic syndrome being linked to CoQ10 deficiency.
It does. And to be honest, I have no idea what that is.
So it's a serious kidney condition. Basically, the kidneys get damaged, they start leaking, allowing proteins to escape into the urine.
Oh, wow.
And that can lead to a lot of swelling, particularly in the legs and feet. It really impacts how well the kidneys can do their job.
So in those cases, it sounds like CoQ10 deficiency could be really serious.
Yeah, definitely not something to ignore.
But you mentioned secondary deficiency being more common.
It is. And this type, it's often related to other health conditions people might have, or even just aging itself.
Really? So as we get older, our bodies might naturally make less of this CoQ10.
Exactly.
Huh. That's definitely something to think about, especially as we, age.
Absolutely. And speaking of aging, that's a perfect segue into our next topic, CoQ10 and its potential role in the aging process.
Okay, let's get into it. Okay, CoQ10 and aging. I have to ask, is there any truth to this whole fountain of youth idea? Can CoQ10 actually slow down aging, or is that all hype?
Well, it's definitely a question that's got people excited. There's been a lot of research on this, and some studies, particularly with animals, show some real promise. They've linked CoQ10 to some pretty impressive improvements in mitochondrial function.
So it's working on those cellular power plants, helping them run better.
Exactly. And in some animal models, they've even seen a potential lifespan extension.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. When you look at human aging specifically, it's a little less clear-cut. The research is still kind of up in the air.
So maybe not a magic bullet just yet,
Right.
but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But you know me, I like to focus on what we know works now. What about using CoQ10 as a treatment for specific conditions?
Okay, so that's where we got to be careful. There's a lot of buzz around CoQ10, but not all the research is super high quality. We have to look at things like how many people were in the studies, how long they went on for.
Basically, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Exactly. That being said, there's definitely some promising evidence for its use in certain areas. For example, cardiovascular disease. There's some good stuff there.
Yeah, heart health seemed like a big one in the research you sent.
Definitely. Studies suggest that CoQ10 might actually improve heart function in patients who have heart failure.
How so?
Well, the thought is that it's giving the heart's energy production a boost, which is super important, especially when you have heart failure.
Makes sense. So those little CoQ10 runners are giving the heart some extra support.
Exactly. And there's this big study, the QSEMBO trial. It found that CoQ10 supplementation actually reduced major adverse cardiovascular events in people with heart failure.
Wow, so it's actually making a difference.
It seems like it.
What about metabolic conditions, like diabetes or metabolic syndrome?
Right. So there, the research is a little all over the place. Some studies show CoQ10 can improve blood sugar levels, cholesterol, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
But then others don't show the same benefits.
So more research is needed.
Definitely. We need more research to really tease out how CoQ10 is impacting these conditions. But switching gears a bit, there's some early research suggesting that CoQ10 might actually protect against kidney disease.
Interesting.
And it might be doing this by reducing oxidative stress and inflammation, which we know are really harmful to the kidneys.
That's interesting because you mentioned the kidneys earlier when we were talking about CoQ10 deficiency.
It's true. There's definitely a connection there.
So it goes both ways.
Exactly. But again, we need those bigger, longer-term trials to confirm these early findings.
Okay, so cautiously optimistic for now. But what about inflammation in general? Everyone seems to be talking about inflammation these days. And we know CoQ10 is a powerful antioxidant.
Right. Inflammation is a hot topic right now, and there are some promising results showing that CoQ10 can reduce inflammatory markers, which can be really beneficial for conditions like rheumatoid arthritis.
So it's not just about energy, it's fighting inflammation too.
Exactly. It's a multitasker. And there's even some early research looking at CoQ10 and Down syndrome, again, potentially because of those anti-inflammatory effects.
Wow. One tiny molecule doing all that. Makes you wonder what else it can do. What about neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's?
Yeah, those are big ones. And unfortunately, the research there is a little less clear-cut. Some research suggests CoQ10 might have neuroprotective effects,
Meaning?
meaning it could help protect brain cells from damage. But the clinical trials have had mixed results so far.
I imagine research on the brain is incredibly complex.
Oh, it definitely is. There are so many factors at play.
But it sounds like there's still a lot we don't know about how CoQ10 affects the brain.
Definitely.
Well, I'm always up for learning more, which is why we're doing this deep dive. But there's one more thing from the research I wanted to ask you about. CoQ10 and fertility.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It feels like uncharted territory.
It's definitely an area of growing interest. And it makes sense when you think about it. CoQ10 is all about energy production. And we know that healthy sperm and egg function, they require a lot of energy.
That's true. It takes a lot of energy to create life.
Exactly. And in men, studies have found a direct link between CoQ10 levels and sperm health.
Interesting. So those little swimmers need their CoQ10.
They do. Men who have higher CoQ10 levels in their semen, they tend to have better sperm parameters. Things like sperm count, motility, morphology, all the things that are important for fertilization.
So basically, the more CoQ10, the better the swimmers.
Pretty much, yeah. And there are a good amount of studies that show that giving CoQ10 supplements to men who are struggling with infertility can actually improve these parameters.
Wow, that's huge for couples trying to conceive.
It really is.
What about women? Is there a connection with female fertility too?
It's still being researched, but there are some early suggestions that CoQ10 might play a role there as well. Just like sperm, eggs need a lot of energy to mature and function properly.
Okay, so those eggs need their fuel too.
For sure. And you know, as women age, the quality and quantity of their eggs naturally declines.
Right.
And this decline is linked to decreased mitochondrial activity within the eggs themselves.
Wow, so even our eggs feel the effects of aging.
It's true. But since CoQ10 is so important for those mitochondria, researchers believe that it might actually help support egg quality and potentially improve fertility, especially as women get older.
That's really interesting. So CoQ10 could be helpful for both men and women when it comes to fertility. We've covered so much today. Energy production, antioxidant effects, potential treatments, and now fertility. Is there anything this CoQ10 can't do?
It's pretty amazing, right? But it's really important to remember that more research is always needed. And what works for one person might not work for another.
Right, everyone's different. And speaking of different, what about dosage? The research you sent mentioned people taking up to 1,200 milligrams. That seems like a lot. 1,200 milligrams, is that even safe?
That's a great point, and it's exactly why you should always talk to your doctor before starting any new supplement,
Makes sense.
especially at high doses like that.
Yeah, safety first.
Absolutely. And what might be a good dose for one person could be way too much for someone else. Your doctor will consider all sorts of things like, your age, any health conditions you have. Oh, and don't forget about medications. They'll make sure there are no weird interactions with anything you're already taking.
So many things to think about. It's definitely not one size fits all.
You got it.
And I guess even though CoQ10 is generally considered safe, like you said, at those higher doses, especially long term, you never know.
Right. Some people might get side effects,
Yeah.
digestive issues, headaches, things like that.
Okay, so start low, go slow, and always talk to your doctor first.
Exactly.
Well, I feel like we've learned a ton about CoQ10, how it works, its potential benefits, its role in aging and fertility.
We really covered a lot of ground.
But even with all this research, it seems like there's still so much we're learning about this tiny molecule.
There really is. It's amazing, We keep uncovering new things about CoQ10 all the time.
It's like with every answer, more questions pop up.
That's science for you. Always evolving, always searching for deeper understanding.
So true. But out of everything we've talked about, what were your biggest takeaways?
It just struck me how essential CoQ10 is to our health overall. We're not just talking about fixing a problem, we're talking about supporting our bodies at the most fundamental level, the cellular level.
That's what I was thinking too, is like CoQ10 is crucial for our cells to function properly, which then impacts everything else.
Exactly. And it just highlights how important it is to stay curious and informed. We're living in a time where science is constantly making new discoveries. It's really an exciting time to be interested in this kind of stuff.
Couldn't agree more. So where does CoQ10 research go from here? What questions haven't we answered yet?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've touched on a few areas where we need more research, like what are the optimal dosages for different people? What about long-term effects? And how does CoQ10 play with other nutrients or medications?
So many possibilities, so many avenues to explore. It's amazing to think there's still so much to discover.
Absolutely. And who knows, those discoveries could lead to even more targeted and effective ways to support our health as we age.
I'm definitely adding CoQ10 to my watch list. It's
Ye-
definitely one to follow. Thanks for diving into this with me. It's been fascinating.
My pleasure. Always love a good deep dive.
And for our listeners, remember, if this conversation sparked your interest in CoQ10, the first step is to talk to your doctor. They can help you figure out if it's right for you. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those questions coming.